Welcome back. Today we're going to be putting together a 13-foot Boston whaler. We're going to cut this video into 5 different parts and we're going to show you step by step what we do here so it's easy to understand. Welcome to part 4. So in the last video, in part 3, we showed you how to put together your Boston whaler console. In this video, we're going to be installing our console with our interior and attaching it to our outboard. This whaler's interior has already kind of been set. We're basically re-putting this whaler back together, so we've already kind of measured out where everything goes. We've already have one sideboard in, and we have the wood. This is here so that the console has something to screw into, so it secures the bottom of the console. And you'll see that when we get further into this. If you haven't had this setup before, if you're starting off fresh, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get your console with your steering cable. So this is me from a future part of the video that we're now putting at the beginning. Before you even connect this steering system, you're going to want to make sure that you thread your sideboard through. So if your sideboard is just a circle here, right, and it doesn't have this opening, then you're going to actually want to thread this through the cable first. That way, otherwise there's no way for you to put this sideboard on. Does that make sense? Because otherwise, since there's a cut here, I can put it in here and it'll just go through the cut. But if yours doesn't have a cut and it's just a circular hole, then you're going to want to thread the steering cable through this first, and then you're going to want to put it in. Make sense? And then you're going to take your steering rod. And the more important step is, because different people have different lengths of the steering cable that they've bought or purchased, I recommend starting by putting your steering cable in through your outboard. So if we're going to take this back over here, take your steering cable and you're going to put it through the outboard. This is where it goes. Okay? Now, there are 2 parts to actually attaching this, and we're going to do that right now. So the first part is over here. You can see that this screws on, right? It's threaded. The other thing is that it's going to attach here. So this is going, so you can actually just move this, turn this. Whoop. There's actually a washer that goes on, and then another washer, and then a nut. So give me 1 second. Then you're going to want to line this up. There you go. Then the next washer and the nut are going to go underneath. Okay? And then I'm going to tighten everything down in 1 sec. It's going to be a 1 1/8 inch. So we can, okay, almost there. Ta-da. Okay. The other thing you're going to want to do, which has already been done here, is grease this. So you can already see there's grease on it. So this has already been greased before we put it in. But if this is brand new and you haven't used it yet, you're definitely going to want to put grease in there. What will happen is if you get water or moisture in this area, then what will happen is your steering cable will get seized and then you won't be able to turn your outboard as easily. So just make sure you grease it. There's also a cap that goes on this end. You're then going to want to put this end cap on. This slides onto here and also screws on the other end. Forgot putting it on the last time, so putting it on this time. Now we have our steering rod attached, which is very important, and you'll see why. We're going to kind of measure out where we're going to put the console. Now in this case, it's already been measured out previously, but if you haven't done this before, then you're going to want to measure it out. So here we can see this is set up, right, where this piece of wood. So there's screws that adhere to the bottom of the console. So those screw into there, which will connect secure the console to the bottom of the boat. And then also there's screws that go here and connect it to the top of the sideboard. And those are the 2 spots that the console connects to the boat. So if we were to put it here, we can see that our side rail is going to be sticking out a little bit. But honestly, that's not too bad. So we can see that this is good positioning. It's a little tight. Maybe they could have moved it a little bit more forward, but the big thing you're looking for is you just don't want it like so far back, now it's like hanging out here in the water, because people have done that before, I've seen it. So you just want to make sure that you pull it forward far enough where it's not going to be, you know, falling into the water essentially. It's important that you don't screw anything in until you have your interior where you want it and you know your steering rod's going to be in the right spot and everything else, because you don't want to keep screwing holes into the side of your boat. You could fill them with epoxy resin, but the less holes you make, the better. Since we are satisfied with the position of this interior, we're going to continue to screw it in. The other thing to note is that we have a tachometer as well. It's going to be at the front of the console, so I'm also going to want to run the wiring for that right now as well. Attach the sideboard. So it's also important, especially if you have the original Boston Whaler sideboards, that they tend to have rubber pieces right here, you can see. So you're going to want to make sure you push down when installing this. That way these rubber pieces really keep the board in place, but also that way it's not floating like above, right? That way you can really get a good seal in between the sideboard and the seat. Ta-da! So now that basically, that's awesome, because now we have our interior in place where we want it. The other thing is that we're already in place were these blocks. So we just put blocks in front of the seats. That way it prevents them from like sliding out. I've also seen if you don't want to use, like if you don't have a block or you don't want to use one, you can also just screw the seat into the lip here as well. I've seen that. So whichever you prefer. So the next part is going to be attaching our console. I'm going to want this to also feed back through here. So we're just going to guide that. This is a personal preference, is for this piece of wood down here, what I'll do is now that I have my interior set, I'm going to push this console up against the sideboard here. Okay, so now this is where I know I would want my console. Now that I know this is where I want my console, I would measure out the spot that I'm going to put this block of wood down here that goes into the deck. And then I would remove the console and then screw this piece of wood in. In my opinion, it's a lot easier to measure out and then screw in the piece of wood and then screw in the console to the side of the block of wood. Now that we have our block in, we're going to continue to put the console. So now that we have the console adhered to the sideboard, we're now going to go into the side of the console into the deck. Okay, nice. Now we have our interior in, our console is attached, we are basically all good to go. That concludes our part 4 for our Boston Whaler series. Next video, we're going to be putting in the fuel system as well as the battery and the electrical. So we'll see you in the next one.